So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this evening for our webinar, which is aimed at giving people more information on what's involved in standing as a candidate for Animal Welfare Party at the next general election. I'm Vanessa Hudson. I'm the leader of Animal Welfare Party, and on the panel tonight I have Jane Smith, who is our deputy leader. We have Louise Cobham, who is our treasurer. We have Gavin Ridley, who is our membership manager. We have Femi Amin, who was a candidate for Animal Welfare Party in the 2019 general election in the constituency of Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner. And we have Sam Morland, who is a candidate for us also in 2019 in the constituency of Chelsea.
Chelsea and Fulham.
Chelsea and Fulham, that's the full name, sorry. So I do actually have a poll that I would like to start the event with, and that's just to gauge your kind of feelings now about where you're at right now on standing as a candidate for Animal Welfare Party. So I'm going to try and launch the poll and see how people feel right now. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll now. Thank you very much, everybody, for your answers. So it seems like for most people, the major concern is concerns around knowledge or experience. And then another concern which ties with the next one is about the time commitment involved, and then also on the same level about being in the public eye. And then, above that, 56% is cost of it, concerns around the cost or the financial implications. And thankfully, nobody has said they're concerned about the actual election results. So that's lovely. Thank you very much for that information there. That's really helpful for us. I'm going to share my screen, which is our presentation on the topic of standing as a candidate for Animal Welfare Party. And just to tell you a little bit about the format that this event will run through tonight. So this presentation should take around 30 minutes, and it's to give you the key facts or information about standing. Then we'll spend 30 minutes approximately hearing from the previous candidates, that's Femi, Sam and Jane. Then we'll have hopefully 15 minutes for Q&A, and we should close the event by around 8:15 p.m. So who or what is Animal Welfare Party? I'm sure some of you probably already know this, and I'm going over old ground, but for those people who are new to Animal Welfare Party and haven't come across us before, we are part of an expanding international group of over 20 political parties for animals around the world. We were established in 2006, and our mission is to create a fairer world for people, animals and the environment. We want to raise the moral and legal status of animals, and the key kind of mission for us is ending speciesism. We really do see our work as an extension of other forms of activism. We would like to see dedicated representatives for animals at all levels of government. And we are registered to contest elections in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. However, we haven't yet contested an election in Wales. We were originally called Animals Count. We changed our name to Animal Welfare Party in 2012. We are completely run by volunteers, so none of us are paid. And all the funds that we receive come from membership fees and donations. We don't receive any government funds. We have contested, it says here 17 elections, but I think it might now be 18. And until May this year, we had one councillor, Jane Smith, based in Alsager in Cheshire. Our key policies, just to run through them, to give you a flavour of the kind of policies you would be standing on if you were a candidate for us. The key policy for us is averting climate catastrophe, improving human health and saving NHS funds by leading on an urgent transition to healthy plant-based diets. We want to redirect farming subsidies away from the animal agriculture and fishery industries and into sustainable plant-based organic agriculture. We want to push for those promised bans on live animal export, trophy hunting imports, and the sale of fur and foie gras to become a reality. We know there's been a lot of promise, but actually they're not here in reality yet. We want to end farming practices and systems which are harmful to animals, biodiversity, and our planet, and that is a lot of our current farming systems. We want to end all slaughter without prior stunning, and we'd like to introduce independently monitored CCTV for all slaughterhouses. want to end animal experimentation with binding targets for reduction, combined with proper funding and real support for non-animal methods. We want to improve product labeling to allow consumers to make informed choices in line with their own principles on the environment, health and animal welfare, and the social circumstances in which a product is produced. We want to end the badger cull and strengthen the fox hunting ban, pushing for a total ban on trail hunting. We want to strengthen companion animal welfare with an end to breed-specific legislation, the sale of animals online and in retail stores, and an end to the exotic pet trade. We want to end the commercial racing of horses and dogs. So each time a general election comes around, we do produce a full manifesto, around 50 pages long, covering not only policies on animals and the environment, but education, housing, etc. So our last manifesto, full manifesto, was written in 2019. It's still available online. It's on our website, but there's a short bit.ly link to it there. To talk a little bit about the general election, which is coming up, we anticipate it's going to be in 2024, but we don't know. It could be called almost at any time, and it has to happen before the end of January 2025. So most people feel it's going to happen in 2024. So currently the UK is divided into 650 constituencies for a general election. But there is a boundary review taking place at the moment, which might reduce the number of constituencies down to 600. So throughout this year, 2023, we anticipate that our main focus will be looking for candidates for this election. And something that some people are surprised about is that in this country, we pay deposits to stand in elections, and for the general election it's a £500 deposit for each constituency contested. So that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why traditionally we've only contested a handful of constituencies at the general election. The other issue is that we haven't had candidates coming forwards to put themselves forwards to stand. So the kind of the two challenges we face are having enough candidates to come forwards and then having the funds to pay the deposit to contest a number of constituencies. I wanted to run through a little bit our previous results. I don't want to bore everyone, so I'm just going to try and pull out the ones that relate to the general election here. So we have contested a number of elections. Some of them are held under the first past the post system, that's general elections, and some of them are held under proportional representation, which is a kind of fairer system for small parties like ours. So the first ever general election we contested was in 2010. We just stood one candidate in the constituency of Islington South and Finsbury, and we got 0.3% of the vote. And then 5 years later, we contested the general election 2015. This time we stood in 4 constituencies. I do think they were all in London. Yeah, they were. And this time we got 0.4% of the vote. 2 years later, there was another general election. This time we stood in 4 constituencies again. This time we started to stand outside of London, and we got an average of 0.5% of the vote. And then 2 years later, there was another snap general election. This time we contested 6 constituencies. This time not only in London, but we stood in rural areas as well. So Kingswood, New Forest East, and I've written Alsager there, but it's actually Congleton. And we got an average of 1% of the vote. So you can see that over the course of those years, our vote share has very slowly gone up. And part of that is that we have springboarded off other elections where we've done better or where they were held under a different system. So the point I'm making is that each election we stand in, we kind of it helps us for the next election and the one after that. I've highlighted there in green an election that we did win. That's Jane Smith in 2019. Got 9.8% of the vote in local elections in Alsager, and she was elected as a town councillor there. So just to run through why we believe it's important, why you should, or why people should stand as a candidate in the general election, what can it achieve? Well, general elections here in the UK have wide awareness, a higher turnout than most other elections. and the mainstream media do give them quite a lot of coverage. So out of all the elections that take place, it tends to be the election that most people are aware is happening. Most people start to think about political issues, about whether or not to vote. And it seems to be that even though it's held under quite an unfair system, it's held under first past the post, it's still very important for us to be part of that. It's an opportunity for us to raise awareness of animal and environmental issues in political decision making, and to really push for those issues to rise up the political agenda and not be ignored. We believe it's creating a space for animal rights in politics here in the UK, and it's part of shifting from our current egocentric politics to ecocentric politics. For us, it's an opportunity to make a stand against speciesism, to help Animal Welfare Party grow. And also for some people, it's an opportunity to make history and inspire other people into action, and to staircase the party for the next election. So every election we contest, we use that to kind of try and do better or improve upon in the next election. So what are we looking for in a general election candidate? Well, you must be a party member by the time you apply. You must be supportive of our vision and our manifesto points, and happy to talk about them. That's why I share the manifesto link, and I do encourage you to read through it and to check that the policies we're putting forwards are those that you'd be happy to talk about. You do need to meet the eligibility criteria for general elections in the UK. I'll cover that in the coming pages. We're looking for people who are motivated to speak up for animals and the environment, but that doesn't mean you need to be a brilliant speaker, just that you need the motivation to put yourself out there. We are looking for people who are happy to campaign on the need for our society to transition to a plant-based food system, and people who are going to be prepared for electors, that's voters, the media, to question them on how that policy sits with their own lifestyle. So we want people who are really comfortable in talking about that. We do need people who have enough time to campaign once the election is announced. That schedule is to be determined because we don't know when the election is yet, but that doesn't mean you need to give up work or anything like that. It just means you kind of need to clear time in your schedule for roughly a month before the election happens. Standing in all elections does involve some researching of issues, because almost no one knows the answer to everything, and so it does involve kind of having an adaptable mindset, being prepared to research issues that you maybe feel you don't know about, being prepared to problem solve a little bit, try new things, go outside of your own comfort zone, whether that's making videos, recording pieces to camera, or whether that's talking to strangers in the street, or whether that's doing media interviews. Standing in election does always somehow push you out of your comfort zone, but almost no one regrets it, I would say. Just to continue what we're looking for in a candidate. So we do want people who will represent the party positively. That is adopting a respectful manner of communication, a professional manner of communication. Even though some of the issues we're dealing with and talking about can make us very angry and very depressed, we still know that we kind of have to convey the arguments respectfully and professionally. We do ask people to dress smartly, or smart casual dress. And we can, if that's a barrier for people, if that feels like something that would stop you from doing it, then we can make a small budget available to people who feel in that position. We do ask that you have either a basic understanding of or a desire to very briefly learn about libel, defamation and sub judice. That's so that if you are going to be commenting online on any issues, that you kind of understand kind of lines that we wouldn't cross, for example. Ideally, our candidates would be online, but it's not a deal breaker if you're not. Ideally, you'd have a smartphone or a camera or someone available around you who could help you cover those aspects of campaigning. So just to talk a little bit about the eligibility that is set in law, this is not anything that Animal Welfare Party has control over. So you do need to be 18 plus to stand for election in a general election. You need to be a citizen of the United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, or an eligible Commonwealth citizen. Now, there are 50 plus Commonwealth countries, and for the purposes of this, an eligible Commonwealth citizen is a citizen who either does not need leave to enter or remain in the United Kingdom, or has indefinite leave to remain in the United Kingdom. There isn't any requirement in law for you to be a registered elector in the United Kingdom. So citizens of other countries, so if you're not a citizen of UK, Ireland, or eligible Commonwealth citizen, then you're not eligible to stand as to be a member of Parliament in the UK, sadly. The Electoral Commission produced tons of guidance that's really helpful for anyone who's kind of unsure if they're eligible. You can just go to electoralcommission.org.uk and find it yourself, but I have put there a link that takes you directly to a document they produce, which is called "Can I Stand for Election?" You could also just Google that, Electoral Commission, "Can I Stand for Election?" And they produce full guidance on kind of most of the criteria there. So as well as being eligible, you also have to not be disqualified. I'll just quickly run through this. So certain post holders are disqualified from becoming a member of Parliament in the UK. That's civil servants, members of the police forces, members of the armed forces, government nominated directors of commercial companies, judges, members of the legislature of any country or territory outside the Commonwealth, peers, bishops of the Church of England. There are a couple of disqualifications around bankruptcy restrictions or debt relief restrictions, some restrictions around imprisonment and court decisions. So the Electoral Commission say in their advice, the full range of disqualifications is complex, and if you're in any doubt about being disqualified, you must do everything you can to check that you're not disqualified before submitting your papers. You can see the full list of restrictions at the Electoral Commission website. I have tried to put the link there. I don't know if anyone can copy that and wants to put that in the chat. But if you think you might be disqualified or there's a chance of it, it's worth checking it out. So the application process for Animal Welfare Party, so just to reiterate, you don't have to be an elector. That means on the electoral roll where you stand for election. So you can stand for election somewhere that you don't live. However, if you don't live where you're standing, you do need to have an election agent who either lives in the constituency where you're standing, or I think it's in a neighbouring constituency. So what we ask applicants to do is to research 3 constituencies that you might conceivably stand in, that you can imagine, could I travel there? Could I get there to campaign? Could I imagine leafleting there? And could I attend events such as hustings events? And then we ask you to research each of those 3 constituencies, looking at issues like who's the current sitting MP and what party do they represent? What majority are they holding that seat with at the moment? From looking around the research that you do you think that seat is being targeted as a realistic gain by another party or an alliance? What bearing do you think AWP standing a candidate in that constituency might have on the final result? And what animal or environmental issues might there be in that constituency? Some things to bear in mind, for example, in Bristol, that I think there are 3 vegan MPs in the Bristol area already. And it's a question for us, like, would we stand against another vegan MP? We might not. We might choose to put our efforts somewhere else. Not saying that's a definite, but they're the kind of things we might be considering. Where are we best focusing our efforts on getting this animal rights message across? Okay, so the process. So fill out and email back our application form. Our application form is on our website at animalwelfareparty.org/current-elections. There's currently no deadline set for applying. That's because we don't know when the election is yet, but as soon as that election is announced, then there will be a deadline set. Then the next stage of the process is that if you apply, you'll be invited to an interview, which will take place remotely with a panel in which we discuss your application. And then once the date of the election is announced, we'd be looking for successful candidates to have weekly meetings with us held remotely. You would need to complete basic data protection training. That's because you'll get, as you go along the process, you'll be given access to sensitive personal data. Then you get sent our nomination papers, which are signed by our nominating officer. You have to go into the constituency and collect 10 signatures of electors, that's people who are voters in that constituency. And and then you hand those completed nomination papers in person to the elections office in the constituency where you're standing. And then if you do all of that correctly by the deadline, if your paperwork is accepted, then you become a candidate, and that's kind of published the next day, normally on the website of the in the constituency where you're standing. And then campaigning starts proper. So just to talk a little bit about what that campaign might look like, well, one of the first things we do is we have official photos taken either by professional or sometimes some people can do it on their own cameras, but professional photos usually work best. We get those photos sent to us, and then we design leaflets centrally. Normally the party pays for leaflet printing, and these days it costs us around £850 to print leaflets, enough for every home in the constituency where you're standing. There is a special deal that for the £500 deposit that you pay to stand in a constituency, almost in return for that, Royal Mail will distribute one leaflet to each home in the constituency for free, as it were, as long as you cover the cost of printing and getting those leaflets to the Royal Mail depot. Now, that sounds like a simple process. It isn't. It's quite painful, but when you get it right and it works, it's a very effective tool, we think, for reaching people. Now, we do have bigger ambitions for this election than we've had in the past. And if we do have more people standing than we have had before, there is a bit of a question mark over whether we've got enough resources, both people and money, to be able to do that. But it's something we would like to do. But it does somewhat depend on getting another volunteer in place to help us with that aspect of campaigning, and also raising enough funds for us to be able to do that for each constituency contested. Once you're actually campaigning, here's some images of kind of, what it looks like when you're campaigning. So you're announced as a candidate, you've got your leaflets, you go out into the constituency where you're standing for election. So here's an image of Jane in a rural constituency. So this is when Jane stood in Congleton, I think. Smallwood is a small village within the constituency of Congleton. And that's Jane, it was a winter election. So that's Jane kind of wrapped up warm for winter out on the streets, leafleting. Now, obviously, in a general election, we already know that if we've got the Royal Mail leaflets right, you don't have to deliver to people's homes because that's already taken care of. But we still do quite a lot of leafleting in the street where we can chat to people and have conversations with people in the street. Other images there, we've got Professor Andrew Knight. He is leafleting on the street there in, I think it's Maidenhead, Theresa May's constituency. And then the other image up at the top is leafleting outside a tube or train station in London. So leafleting in the constituency where you're standing is a big part of what we do. There also, now if you're lucky, you get invited to something called hustings. So a hustings is an event organised by the local community, can be a kind of special community interest group. It's an opportunity. They normally invite all the candidates standing to a public place where each candidate is sat on a panel in person, and members of the public have an opportunity to put questions to each of you to find out what you would do or say or think about a certain topic or idea or problem. So it is great when you get invited to a hustings. Generally speaking, it does involve quite a lot of research, because if you can imagine, most people there, only one or two of them might be really interested in animal or environmental issues. A lot of people, the questions they're asking, they don't concern animal and environmental issues so much. So you do need to do kind of quite a broad range of research around what issues really matter to voters in that area. What are the key issues specific to that constituency, and have a good lie of the land on what's happening there and what animal welfare policies would be to those issues. So it is something that involves quite a lot of research, but it's also quite rewarding. And at the end, we've got a video from Professor Andrew Knight. He's going to talk about how he found that he was actually he did very well at hustings despite having only done a little bit of preparation. So once you are announced as a candidate, you probably do get a flurry of media requests. If you're lucky, it's a request for an interview in person, either a radio interview or a meeting a journalist in a cafe or something and talking about your policies or why you're standing. But quite often it's just an email request for information. Could you send me your top 5 policies or your top 3 policies? We have handled those centrally in the past. It's a question whether we would handle them centrally going forwards. But yeah, quite often you get requests for information from journalists, and that's great. That's what it's all about. That's kind of why we're doing it. We want journalists to cover our standing for elections. So that's a key part of campaigning and why we do it. We do create our own content for social media. That might be introducing our candidates. So on the right hand side there, you'll see a video, just a very short video that Sam made introducing himself. We also create short videos or still content for introducing our key policies. And when we have the budget, we target those on social media to audiences that we want to target. So obviously you can target by geographical area. We sometimes do that when we've got the budget. And then on the day of the election itself, polling day takes, polls are open from 7 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. You can still campaign on polling day. And we do that within the rules of campaigning on polling day. And if you do live in the area where you're standing for election, you can, cast your vote and put photos of you on social media, casting the vote for yourself and encouraging other people to vote, etc. So there is still quite a lot of work happening even on polling day. And then after the polls have closed, then the votes go to be counted, and as a candidate you're invited to the count. That's where the votes are counted and then the results were announced. You can take team members with you, but you need to kind of arrange all of that a couple of weeks beforehand, so they won't let anyone in who isn't kind of on the list, as it were. So your supporters, and it is lovely if you have people with you that will go, because the count is, well, it's not really a fun affair. It's normally very late at night that you're there, and the announcements are kind of like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, when everyone's very bleary-eyed and kind of lacking a sense of humor by that point. So if you do have people that will come with you, that definitely would make it more pleasant, and it's just nice to have people on your side in your team sort of rooting for you when you're at something like that. So but you all go up on stage. I would say that by the time you get up on stage, you do already know the results. You get normally taken to one side beforehand and told what the results are, so you get a couple of minutes to digest it, and then they invite you all up on stage where they read it out formally. And then the person who has won normally makes a speech. Sometimes the person who's come second gets to make a speech. It's very rare that they let all candidates make a speech, but sometimes there are members of the press there. So the images that I've put in here, which are not mine, they belong to the East London Advertiser, but they were at the count where I stood for election in 2019. This is the constituency of Bethnal Green and Bow. So there's the MP, Rushlana Ali, giving her acceptance speech, thanking everybody. But there were journalists around, and they took me to one side and asked me what was my definition of success, something like that. So it's still an opportunity, even at the count, to kind of get the message out there. I think I spoke about the environment and about what I thought other politicians weren't talking about, even though we were in a climate crisis. And luckily, they kind of published some of that. And then once the election's taken place, there is a little bit of wrap up to do, but that's mainly financial wrap up, kind of doing our spending returns. And for a party like ours, where we don't have huge campaigning budgets, there aren't a lot of lines in our spending return to account for. So it's normally things like leaflets, videos, advertising, that kind of thing. It's not a huge tally of items that we've spent money on. That has to be done within a certain time frame, and then once that's completed, emailed back to the returning officer, then your kind of your obligations are done. Now, to talk a little bit about some inspiration for us, which is huge. So our sister party last year, 2022, our sister party, Parti Animaliste in France, they managed to stand over 400 candidates in the legislative elections. Now their system is a little bit different in France. They don't pay deposits to stand for elections. So and they do receive funding from the French government to run their party. So both of those things are different for us. But they did manage to get over 400 people to apply to stand for election and who went forwards with being candidates. So for us, that's a real inspiration. We saw this and we kind of thought, okay, how did they do that? How did they manage to get 400 people to put themselves forward to stand for election? They didn't have any magic tricks up their sleeve or anything like that. They just really widely advertised the fact that they were looking for candidates. So we wondered, could we do something similar? Could we do a lot better than we've done in previous elections? So as I mentioned, there are currently 650 constituencies, but that might have gone down to 600 by the time of the next election. Now we found out that we should qualify for a party election broadcast, sometimes called a party political broadcast, if we contest 1/6 of the seats or more. So that would mean, for example, contesting between 100 and 108 seats. If we did that, we think we would get a party election broadcast. Now, for us, that would be great because it would give us an opportunity on TV to discuss some of the key themes for our movement, themes of climate crisis, plant-based diets, the treatment of animals, the treatment of biodiversity. It would be great for us to have that platform on TV talking about those issues. And that's why we'd love to do that. But obviously, it's a really tall ambition. We don't know if it's possible, but we'd like to give it a try. And obviously, financially, it would require us to really raise a lot of funds. So we need at least £50,000 just in the deposits alone before we covered any other aspects of campaigning. So it's something for us to stretch for and try and achieve, either in this election or the next one. And that's one of the reasons we're holding events like this, trying to see if we can convince people to put themselves forward to stand. Now, there are some challenges, just to run through a few of them here. So it's not all plain sailing, it's not all easy. So we are doing low budget campaigning versus the other parties. So whereas other parties might be able to put out 3 leaflets to each home in a constituency, we're normally only doing 1. We're all volunteer run, so we're all working around the fact that everyone involved also has day jobs or other obligations. So we're not super quick and snappy. We're not able to respond super quickly to events. So normally we need a long time to plan things. And then in the past, we really have been excluded from some events because we're a small party. And I would say that's particularly annoying because we believe we represent more than just humans. We're there to represent animals and the environment, and humans only make up 0.01% of all life on Earth, and we're the ones speaking up for the other. But here we are, quite often excluded from some things in elections, and yeah, sometimes we get excluded from hustings. So it's happened to Femi, I believe, happened to Professor Andrew Knight when he stood in Maidenhead, and it happened to me last time. This was the photo is from hustings held by London Metropolitan University. They invited all the candidates and put them on that long table there. Apart from me, I was not allowed to sit on that table because our party was too small, apparently. So I had to sit on a chair in the audience. And because I complained, and thankfully some other audience members complained, they actually gave me 2 minutes to speak at some point during the proceedings. So I did try and get across as many points as I could during those 2 minutes, but it was very annoying. And I did make the case that I think in a democracy, everyone standing for election should be allowed to speak at an event like that, and voters should be able to hear from all candidates. So it's not always easy. We are still fighting a bit of a battle, but I think if you're here in this webinar, it's because you really know animal and environmental issues matter, and those fights are worth having, as it were. Now, I would like for you to hear from some of our previous candidates. So I'm going to talk to Femi first, and then I'm going to stop my screen share and hand over to Sam. So Femi.
Yes.
if I could invite you to talk to us and tell me when you'd like me to turn to the next page of the presentation.
Sure, thank you. You can turn to the next page now. It's just me at the count. Hi everyone, thanks Vanessa for giving me the opportunity to talk about my experience. It's a privilege to be here and talking to those who are thinking about standing. So just a bit of background about me. I'm a pharmacist professionally, full-time, so I've got full-time work, and I did during the elections as well, so I continued with that. I have a 2-year-old and live with my 2-year-old and my partner. So in terms of my motivations for joining Animal Welfare Party and also standing in the 2019 elections, just a bit of background. I became aware of the farming industry and the practices that goes on in 2018. So not long before 2019 is when I started looking into it, and I wanted to do something and I wanted to raise awareness. So I joined into 2018. I joined a few outreach groups and protests. But I wanted to have that wider reach. And that's when I found out about Animal Welfare Party. And I thought it was great to have the political platform that gives you that mandate to reach to a broader audience. So I was fortunate enough to be selected to stand for the Animal Welfare Party in 2019 elections, and I used that platform to engage in conversations because I was able to go door to door. I was able to go to the high street to hand out leaflets, and to also go to, there were a couple of school talks that I was invited to, as well as 2 hustings, but I was excluded, like Vanessa said, from one of the hustings. So I was able to use those platforms to talk about not just the ethical aspects of animal use and exploitation, but also something that people don't usually connect with animal use and farming, and it's overlooked, and that's the environmental aspect, and that's how devastating the impact of animal exploitation is on the environment. And we know that it's something that people care more and more about. So that was really good opportunity. And in terms of just thinking about my initial reservations before I joined, I did think whether it's something that, or in my head, I thought it's something that you only did if you, as a full-time, you needed a lot of time commitment. So yeah, you do need some time, but it's something that I was able to juggle with my full-time work, with my full-time employment. So I could use evenings to go and do leafleting. Weekends, I did take a couple of days off work, but otherwise I was able to, I found that it wasn't a major concern. So one of the other reservations that I had is, like some of you said in the poll, was if you had I had no previous experience, and I only became at that point, I had become aware of some of the animal welfare issues and animal rights, it was a year or so. So I thought it's something that perhaps I couldn't talk about, and also I did not have any idea of what it took to stand for the Animal Welfare Party and to stand in an election. But then what I did find was that you do get a lot of experience just before the elections by talking to the Animal Welfare Party. We had some meetings where everything was talked through. There's also a couple of meetings from the constituency, from the council, where they run through everything in quite a detail, and you have the opportunity to ask questions. And in terms of my experience regarding the Animal Welfare Party's manifesto, we have quite an extensive manifesto that I was able to look through and so like get all the knowledge and learn from. Obviously, there might be things that if you go to hustings, there were still questions that might not have been answered in the manifesto, but we know what Animal Welfare Party's position is. So based on that, I think you are able to give a reasonable answer. And then the third reservation was not knowing the process of what happens afterwards, and not being confident in being able to talk to the journalists and if needed. But I think once I was able to commit, and once I knew the process, then that confidence came with knowing the process better. So that would be my advice. Just get to know the process and the confidence comes. I'm not a very confident person. But just by understanding the process, getting to know the manifesto, and like the most important thing is just being able to be like, we know why we are standing, just being genuine in what we stand for, and that's mainly for animals, and then in terms of the environment, the people, they all come hand in hand. So just talking a bit about the outcomes, I am glad that I stood, and I'm planning on standing if I'm given the opportunity in 2024 as well. And that's because it allowed me to amplify that message I had around animals and the effect it has on both human health, but also on the environment. So there's quite a few topics that we can discuss, and this sort of platform allows you to amplify your message. And I know that we are a small party, and will probably not get elected, but you never know. But the least we can do is to have an impact on other parties, because when I went to hustings and to some of the other like school talks, I felt that the questions that were asked, and there were some animal related questions, other parties did take notice. So we can be that catalyst for change, even if we can't make that change happen straight away. And it also gave me legitimacy as an individual to be able to be confident, say I have stood for Animal Welfare Party when I go to other like talks or protests, etc. And also along the way, you never know who you will meet, because I got to meet, I think it's called Lord Buckethead or Binhead in the elections, as you can see, at like 3 in the morning. But also I got to have a chat with Andrew Marr, and he asked what party I stood for, and he asked like what some of our policies were. And he said, I don't usually I don't usually take pictures with everyone because it might show that I'm endorsing them, but I'm happy to take a picture with you. So yeah, so there you are. So just a few last words. As we look ahead for like the 2024 elections, I urge you all to consider at least the power that this sort of political candidacy has. And I know you might think, well, we might not win the election, but you still get to reach a lot of people, and that collective effort can help shape the future of animal welfare policy. So Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I'm happy also for you to reach out after this event if you have any questions or if you just want to chat.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
Femi. That was wonderful. Thank you. So now, Sam, and I'm going to stop my screen share so that Sam can share.
Yep. So thank you to Vanessa and to Femi. I think my talk, I'm probably going to talk less about my motivation, and Femi gave a very good talk about her motivation, talk more about the process and really how I dealt with it or didn't deal with it. So I stood in Chelsea and Fulham, which is an inner London constituency. And this was the timeline for the 2019 election. And while every election the timeline will be slightly different, I wouldn't expect the next election to be that dissimilar to this. And the key point here is that the gap between the date that the election was known and getting the nomination papers in was 2 weeks. And there is quite a bit of admin to get through to get yourself on the ballot paper. It's all quite manageable, but it definitely helps to be organized and know what hoops you have to go through beforehand. And from the date the nominations were closed to the election was 4 weeks. So the actual campaign itself was 4 weeks long. Getting on to the ballot paper, the Animal Welfare Party has experience of the nomination process and getting candidates onto the paper. So there's nothing really to be worried about here. But as Vanessa has basically explained, there are a few processes to go through. And just like Femi said, I always found the nominating officer and the officials very friendly and trying to help. So once you get to the nomination date and afterwards, you find out who you're actually competing against in the election. And in my case, I had 3 other candidates, Labour, Liberal, and the Conservatives. And as you can see here, there's no obligation to disclose your home address. So 3 of the 4 candidates, myself included, decided not to disclose the home address. So I think that's quite important about sort of privacy and privacy concerns. The other candidates I had included some, I guess, moderately famous people. So I had Greg Hands, who currently is now a cabinet minister and chair of the Conservative Party. There's Nicola Horlick, who has been on Question Time and I think called by the media Superwoman. So once, and therefore once you're nominated, you have a campaign to run, and you can do as much as you're able. In the 2019 election, I would say the party wasn't directing how I campaigned, and this was really up to me to decide. And you have to be a bit nimble as opportunities develop. You never know quite what opportunities you're going to get. So just other organizational points. I think you need to decide what key points you want to focus on the election when you're campaigning. You've got to get the leaflets printed, and as Vanessa said, the party will help a lot with this. I think it's useful, if you can find the constituents or locals who are willing to help you, able to help you. And as Vanessa said, you need to keep a track on your spending. So, do you have an appropriate photo ready? I got this one done just before the campaign started, which was taken in front of the old Chelsea Town Hall, so somewhere in the constituency. This was my election leaflet. You can ask, in the 21st century, do we still need leaflets? I think that's a good question, but as Vanessa said, it gets delivered to every household. And in Chelsea and Fulham, that meant to 63,100 households. So, and people do notice that it's there. Here are some photos of me leafleting, some in this election, some in previous ones, if you're eagle-eyed. I try to find high footfall areas in the constituency, and this basically meant being outside a tube station, either in the morning or even better in the evening. People had a bit more time in the evening. And there were 5 tube stations in the constituency, and you basically try to get in front of one before some other party had got there. If when I was out on the street handing out leaflets, I think is a great way to meet electors. Some people don't want a leaflet, some just take the leaflet, but other people want to talk. And I always try to smile. And that if people notice me, at least they, whether they were thinking of voting AWP or had no interest, at least they think, oh, the AWP candidate was someone reasonable, seemed cheerful, you know, leave a good impression. Hustings, Vanessa spoke about hustings, and this is what you've just got to take it as it comes. In my case, because there were only 4 candidates, you know, although I wasn't automatically invited to any of the or to all the hustings, I could invite myself on, and because there were 3 main parties and myself, they all said yes without any issues. So I was in that very fortunate position. There were 5 hustings and I went to them all. This column on the right is my recollection of roughly how many people were at each husting. So you know, I was able to speak to around 500 people. But as Vanessa explained, if there are lots of candidates, you might not get invited to hustings. Conversely, there's no obligation to attend any of the hustings. In my election, the Labour candidate, he didn't show up for 2 of them. So the 5 hustings were in over a 10-day period. So that was quite intense, but it was a great opportunity to get the message across to people who, by definition, because they were attending the hustings, are quite interested in the political process. So this photo is of the first hustings, which was the Extinction Rebellion hustings. And as you can see, there's a chair and then the 4 candidates. Not all the hustings are equal, which I didn't realize until afterwards. And in my constituency, the second hustings, which was held in a local church, was by far the best attended. It got the most publicity. It had the biggest cross-section of people at the hustings. And you can see here the banner advertising the hustings saying all 4 candidates in capital letters, all 4. Now, I'm not a natural public speaker, but I really enjoyed the hustings and I felt it gave me an opportunity to explain how animals are exploited in our society, you know, on an equal footing with all the other candidates. Here, the left-hand photo shows one of the smaller hustings at Kensington and Chelsea College. And as you can see, there were only 3 candidates present at that one. And then in the morning, early morning, you get the results after the election. So my sort of general tips for anyone thinking about or wanting to be a candidate or being a candidate is, you know, be yourself, be honest. So if you don't know something, say so. You know, don't try to make it up, and leave a polite impression. You know, was I a good candidate? Well, I'm sure I made lots of mistakes and errors, but so did the other candidates from the 3 established parties, who quite often said some very silly things, you know. But I'm sure many of the people on this call would probably do a better job than me. And maybe they have more contacts than me in the animal campaign groups. Maybe they understand the issues better than me, and maybe they're more eloquent than me. But I think that's not really the point when you think, should I be a candidate or not? Because I think the question, you know, was I a good enough candidate? And my answer is, yes, I was. Because the choice was, at least in 2019, was not between me and some hypothetical sort of perfect candidate. The actual choice was between me standing or no one standing up against animal abuse in Chelsea and Fulham. And I'm very confident that me standing was better than having a void there. So I'll just finish by saying to anyone who's thinking of standing for the AWP, you know, I found it a very fun, interesting experience. And even if, you know, you think you're not the ideal candidate, you know, do consider putting yourself forward, because I'm sure you can really do a good job. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Sam. That was brilliant. You made some really great points there. Thank you. So Jane, next, if you would like to speak.
I stood for Animal Welfare Party in the December 2019 general election. I didn't hesitate to put myself forward. I think it was a little bit different for me because I was already an AWP councillor. So I was used to putting myself out there and speaking in public and things like that. But certainly in terms of general election, I absolutely knew that the kind of policies that we want to see, certainly regarding animals and the environment, are absolutely not represented in mainstream politics at all. So that was the main reason I wanted to be out there. And much as Sam said, if it's a choice between me doing or there's no one speaking up for animals and environment in this area, then yeah, I've got to go ahead and do it. I didn't really know what to expect. I'd only done local elections before, and general election is a little bit of a different species. I think my fears were probably along the lines of, am I going to get a real bruising from very confident people from mainstream parties? Actually, with regards to that, I was quite surprised at how poorly prepared some of them were, and I just needn't have worried about that at all. I'll talk a little bit about that. I also thought it might be quite a sort of toxic experience, and it certainly wasn't. It was far from it. There was a little bit of toxicity from certain quarters in the big parties, but I actually think that just made them look pretty horrible, and was a big sort of own goal on their part. So yes, I needn't have worried in the end. It was a real honour and privilege to speak up for people, animals and environment in a general election, and to be the first animal politics candidate standing for Parliament in my area, which of course is true of a lot of our Animal Welfare Party candidates. So if people are thinking about standing for the first time where they are, the chances really are that you'll be the first person ever to stand for Parliament on an animal rights ticket, which is a really, really fantastic thing. So of making history in that sense, absolutely regardless of the outcome. Just being out there, standing up for the things that we believe in, and being the first animal politics candidate in your area on this platform is a really, really big thing. In terms of outcomes, obviously it's kind of a little bit at the moment a mission impossible for a really small party like ours to, suddenly get an MP in this process. But we're in the business, aren't we, of changing hearts and minds. And what a general election gives us is an absolutely amazing opportunity to get our message out there in front of people, voters, the media, etc. Not least through hustings debates. So in the Congleton constituency, I actually didn't do too much leafleting, partly because we had 5 hustings debates, which in this area, they're well attended. So I kind of knew that the local media would all be reporting on these debates, that I needed to be that I needed to really bring a good game and be as prepared as I could be. I think I was very nervous the first time. I, would beat myself up thinking, well, what if somebody asks me specifically a question about defence budgets? Or, and those sorts of things just didn't happen at all. The questions from the floor tended to be quite general. And they were always the kind of things where it was fairly straightforward to sort of wrestle the question round to what you really want to speak about while answering the question to some extent. So I actually love hustings debates. A really, really fantastic opportunity for us, like I said, and also a really good chance to challenge in the flesh, live, the mainstream parties, including our local MP who is defending her seat, to challenge them on all their unkept promises and their inaction on so many issues that are of crucial importance to us and to so many other people. If I hadn't have been on those panels in the hustings debate in Congleton in 2019, not only nobody would have mentioned trail hunting, which is rife in Cheshire, or trophy hunting, or animal agriculture, nobody would even have mentioned climate emergency. out of those mainstream parties. That's how bad it was. So just standing on our ticket and our issues, we were really, really different from everybody else in those hustings debates. And therefore, what I said got reported on. So it was really, really helpful to the local campaign here. That to quite a large extent, I benefited from a general feeling amongst audience members and the public that, wow, this person's an underdog. This is a tiny party compared to these juggernauts. And I think, going from my experience, you do get quite a good level of, I guess you're received warmly by people. I think people understand whether they agree with our policies or not. I think people have an understanding that it takes quite a lot of courage to stand for a small party in a general election. So that's on our side as well, and it will be this time, in the next election and the one after, and so on. So that's something else that we've got. We'll get people to this day in the street, in the supermarket, etc., saying to me that something that I mean, different things that were said in the hustings debates by me, therefore by Animal Welfare Party, made them change their minds or think differently about something. Doesn't necessarily mean they voted for us, but it's really, really nice to hear that even now people remember, and it had some sort of impact on how they feel about certain major issues. There's also, of course, incredible power of having Animal Welfare Party, therefore the word animal, on the ballot paper. It's an amazing thing. And I think I've said this before in an elections webinar, but I did get a little note from a lady who I'd never met after the election in 2019. And she said, "Thank you so much for standing. I've waited my whole life to see the word animal on a ballot paper in a general election." That was really, really nice. I wish I'd known that people felt like that while I was sort of nervously waiting for my first husting, but I know it now. So yeah, and there's got to be people like that everywhere. So I think you have to bear that in mind as well. You don't always get to hear the positive stuff that people receive from what we do. You know, we sort of put it out there. We don't necessarily know where it lands. I'd encourage anybody who's thinking about this to apply and give it a go. You get lots and lots of support from the National Committee, Animal Welfare Party, and also from other members. You certainly don't have to be an expert on absolutely everything. You just have to be a decent person, standing up for these issues, prepared to give it a go, and put your heart and soul into it. Not least because animals, of course, need us to speak up for them in human decision making, and nowhere more so than in a general election, which is the heart of our human politics in this country. So I'd really love to see more people than ever apply. If you're feeling worried about any issue in particular and barriers to standing, like other people have said, just get in touch and talk them through with us. But I can't recommend highly enough the experience of standing as a candidate.
Oh, thank you, Jane. That's lovely to hear that. Thank you so much for those inspiring comments. So the final previous candidate we're going to hear from is Andrew Knight. Andrew can't join us for this session tonight. He has stood for us in general elections 3 times, in 2015 in Kensington, 2017 in Maidenhead, and 2019 in New Forest East. He recorded a video for us about his experiences.
Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Knight. I'm a veterinary professor of animal welfare, and I've been involved in animal advocacy campaigns for about 25 years. From 2007 to 2012, I was a spokesperson for the Animal Welfare Party, which was then called Animals Count. We were based on the highly successful Dutch Party for the Animals, and we aimed to raise the status of animal issues within UK politics and legislation. We've also successfully inspired and assisted the establishment of political parties for animals in other countries as well. I was an electoral candidate for the party in the 2014 EU parliamentary election and in the UK general elections of 2015 in Kensington, 2017 in Maidenhead, and 2019 in New Forest East. In 2017, I stood against Prime Minister Theresa May in her home constituency of Maidenhead. Of course, I didn't manage to unseat her, but we received more votes than any of the other minor parties, emphasising the importance of animal welfare, and helped to ensure that the Conservative Party thereafter dropped its plans to reintroduce fox hunting. Due to workload, I had very little time for campaigning, so it always surprised me just how well we did. And I think that was for several reasons. One is that many people sympathise with animal causes. They're also often highly disillusioned with the major parties. Due to workload, I've had very little time to research issues and had no prior experience with hustings events before I started. So I was very surprised indeed to have done extremely well in the ones that I did attend. I particularly recall a New Forest hustings event. It was a beautiful old hall, decked out with what seemed to be Christmas decorations in the New Forest, with hundreds of local people in attendance in the audience. By the end of it, it was wonderful to see that they virtually all seemed to be thinking about and supportive of animal welfare because of the points that I'd managed to make during the hustings debates. Simply reading The Guardian and watching the news regularly seems to be enough to give one a good knowledge of most broad electoral issues. Some local research and familiarity with local issues is also important. And then simply being articulate enough may actually help you to win the day. I was really surprised to apparently be doing better in the hustings events than some of the professional politicians, and it gave a major boost to my confidence, not having done this kind of thing before. It's amazing how well you can do simply by being broadly well informed by reading and watching the news, having clearly ethical and responsible policies on animals and other issues, and simply by being articulate. We may not be large enough to win elections, but we can certainly raise awareness of and support for animal welfare. I'd certainly encourage people with strong communication skills who are broadly well informed to consider this role. It can be surprisingly rewarding. Thank you.
I'd like to launch the final survey to see if anything we've spoken about tonight has kind of improved the way people feel. The question is, so after having sat through the webinar, what issues, if any, still stand in the way of applying to be a general election candidate for AWP? And they should be the same options as last time, but do you feel any differently about them? So if you wouldn't mind filling this in, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll there. So seems most people now, the major concern is time commitment, and then people are still concerned a little bit about concerns around knowledge or experience or being in the public eye. So thank you very much for letting us know your thoughts there. Oh, also one thing that I did want to mention, if you are watching this and you think standing as a candidate isn't for me for whatever reason, there are some other roles that we're looking to fill. These are volunteer roles, but they would help us with our general election campaign. So we are looking for an elections project coordinator. That's to help with all the kind of management of the election campaign. We are looking for either a social media manager or a social media assistant. That's someone with experience. We are also looking for a web editor. And then we're looking for various research leads in each of our key manifesto areas. That's farmed animals, companion animals, wild animals, animals in research, the transition to plant-based diet, climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis. And that would be to update the Committee of National Officers weekly on developments in this area. And the information that is provided weekly will inform our next manifesto. And all of these roles will be on a 6-month trial basis. The people who apply for those positions, ideally, we would like to have 6 months party membership. And we're also looking for a London working group officer. That is someone who would basically coordinate and arrange the meetings of our London members. So all those vacancies are online, animalwelfareparty.org/vacancies. And just if you would like to get in touch with us, there are details. You can follow us on Twitter at Animals Count. You can follow us on Facebook at Animal Welfare Party. You can follow us on Instagram at animal_welfare_party. You can join us at animalwelfareparty.org/join, and you can donate at animalwelfareparty.org /donate. And just leave with a last image, just a little bit of inspiration. I don't know if anyone else saw this week, but I came across this video and it was described as being a chimpanzee who'd spent her whole life in a research facility. And she eventually was rescued, taken to sanctuary. And this is her seeing the sky for the first time. And it's just to remind ourselves that amazing and great things are possible when we put a little bit of effort in. So hopefully that will inspire us for change. So thank you very much, everyone, for giving up your time tonight. We really appreciate it. And yeah, please do get in touch if you'd like to know more, have any questions about standing, and we hope we've inspired you to stand. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.